Boy, do we have an awesome show today on the Catholic Champion. I'm your host, John Yep, co-host Michael Hichborn, talking today about what's going on in all the secular news. It's the church and the president. This is exactly what we're supposed to be doing here as Catholic for Catholics, is just seeing everything that's going on in the world from a Catholic point of view. Stay tuned. When you are a political, cultural organization that is fighting for Catholics in America, there are times where you get media requests, which are normal, and then there are times when it's just like over the top. These past 3 days, and it really hasn't stopped, have been just some days of intensity. We've probably done here on Catholics for Catholics maybe about 10 different interviews on major outlets, Wall Street Journal, New York Times, National Public Radio, NPR, almost had one with CNN last night. They canceled last minute. BBC, some European outlets, one with the Messaggero. It's a major newspaper in Italy. So what are they talking about? What is going on? What could they possibly reaching out to Catholics for Catholics for a statement on and a response? Well, again, unless you're living under a rock, you probably would be missing the fact that there is this, some call it a feud between Pope Leo and President Trump. And Michael, how are you doing, by the way?
Couldn't be better.
Couldn't be back. I called Michael yesterday, and he was in the middle of carrying a 50-pound bag of chicken feed. And those of you who have never done that, I've done that myself. Those are big bags of feed. We got a few more chicks for the flock. So yeah, it's part of being grounded, right, Michael?
Oh, yeah, it was 4 bags of chicken feed, and hopefully we'll be getting some more chickens here fairly shortly. We lost most of our flock a couple of years ago. So,
starter feed, or was it pellets? It
was pellets. Yeah, this is pellets. I'm not going to go through the route of raising, pullets again. It's too much work.
Too much work, yeah. For that. Yeah, it's a fun. It's my shout out for chickens. They help you de-stress a lot. So. But I have another cool way for de-stressing. This is actually a fact. Before I get into the hard stuff, the controversial stuff, scientists discover that silence regenerates the brain. Okay, incomplete silence for at least 2 hours a day can stimulate the creation of new brain cells, especially in regions linked to memory and learning. Did you know that, Michael?
I wasn't aware, but I prefer silence over noise anyway. So.
Maybe there's a method when Christ is asking us to come and see him in silence and pray. It's been 30 minutes of adoration a day. Maybe there's a reason for that. Mm-hmm. So anyway, so yeah, heavy on the media thing, because there's been this feud going on with President Trump, supposed anyway. Some have amplified it. We're going to talk later in the show about who is behind these attacks. It's very important. This is a nuanced situation that if you're kind of like just black and white on it, you're going to miss a lot of things. So it's important to have these longer form podcasts, like even the sound bites we might do with Newsmax or Fox News or whatever. It's very hard to get into like the depth of it. So podcasts are essential, right? To really kind of be informed about what is going on.
As you know, I like to put everything in context. I can't stand any statement being issued in a vacuum. It just doesn't make any sense, and it doesn't work.
I think that's why Michael, or Tucker Carlson, to your point, Michael. He did years of cable news, right? So there was typical, you bring on a guest, I know it is a zillion times, you bring on a guest, you have like 3 minutes to say something, right? Yep. And then that's it. And I think there's a reason Tucker and how it shifted in the later part of his career, and by the way, I think it's the pinnacle of his career, to longer form, like 3-hour podcasts, right? And you actually get to know what's going on. And I think it's very, very smart of him to do that. So here's our statement that we put out. I'm pulling this up on X. We put this out on, gosh, what was that? It was 2 days ago, okay? Catholics for Catholics statement on President Trump's attack on Pope Leo. President Trump's attack on Pope Leo yesterday, Sunday, April 12th, was disheartening and merits an apology. His subsequent post depicting himself as Jesus is as scandalous. It is as dangerous as it is scandalous to all Christians. The speed with which the picture was removed confirms the mistake that it was. These actions follow the Holy Week prayer service at the White House, where President Trump's close pastors and pastoresses in quotation marks,
Yeah.
dangerously declared that whatever he chooses to do will be blessed by God. Putting yourself as the highest moral authority as a leader is a recipe for disaster. The current situation surrounding some of the recent online attacks from President Trump is alarming. Christians are still reeling from his Easter morning vulgar rant about attacking Iran. We covered that last week, where he's swearing and cussing about attacking Iran. Increasingly, it seems that he is surrounded by an inner circle, one that is heavily influenced by a Zionist Israel First cohort to tell him exactly what he wants to hear. When President Trump boasts on social media that a CNN poll has him at 100% approval rating, while all the base shows a completely different picture, that should be a cause for concern. The attack on Pope Leo is primarily a reaction to the Holy Father's courageous calls for peace amidst the Iran war and Israel's bloody destruction of southern Lebanon. It's a war that's highly unpopular, especially among Catholics who sense the somewhat immoral nature of the conflict, let alone the net loss for America. Israel has pulled us into war and continues to threaten the peace with their insatiable desire for territorial expansion. Meanwhile, American money and blood pay for this greater Israel project. President Trump is absolutely wrong to tell the Pope not to speak up on issues like this. That is precisely the role of the Church, to be a voice of morality in the public square. We are grateful to the Holy Father for speaking up bravely on this. At the same time, we must address a troubling trend. There is a well-organized attempt by the left to sever the Catholic base from the Republican Party, which up until now has been more aligned with the Catholic teaching than the Democrat Party. The Democrats still have not recovered from the historic landslide that Catholics delivered to President Trump in the 2024 election. The recent amplifications of a discord between Rome and the White House, oftentimes exaggerated, trace back to left-leaning Catholics in name only, who are determined to swing the Catholic vote back in the other direction. This is a highly coordinated operation from key Obama advisors and prominent liberal Catholic clergy, intentionally stoking the flames of discord with the intention of separating the Catholic base from the Republican Party. The recent CBS interview with Cardinals McElroy, Cupich, and Tobit, speaking out against the Iran war, while failing to ever address the scandals of, quote, Catholic President Joe Biden, demonstrates his point. Catholic patriots ought to be prudently aware who is behind these provocations. In this sense, President Trump is right to ask the Holy Father about his high-profile meeting with key Obama strategist David Axelrod. Without clarification, this meeting threatens to drag the Pope into the group described above that is not operating out of love for truth, but out of a sinister desire for disunity. The independent voice of the Holy Father as Vicar of Christ, solely focused on defending the faith, is what we all desire and pray for. The role of the Catholic patriot in America is more crucial than ever. Our faith gives us the freedom never to be sheep that follow blindly a political leader or even a pope who may at times err in his prudential judgments. We are sheep, but sheep that follow the Good Shepherd, Jesus Christ, whose teachings found in the Catholic Church, are what we must live and die for. In closing, let us pray for President Trump. The demands and pressures of the job of president are unparalleled. He's under intense pressure, and he deserves our unfailing prayers. Let's not fail to remember the tremendous good that President Trump has done for America. We ask God to bless him, and we ask that our church may be the support for this republic that it needs to be to remain one nation under God. Michael, just comments going right at the beginning of this. The whole depiction of himself as Jesus. Maybe throw that picture on the screen and have Michael comment on this whole thing. What do you think, Michael?
Well, I mean, obviously it's blasphemous, sacrilegious, really. There shouldn't be, I mean, I don't know if he is being honest or if he's just losing kind of his grasp on reality a little bit by saying that he thought he was being depicted as a doctor. I thought that was kind of a ridiculous take. And I think that the fact that he took it down very, very quickly is at least a tacit admission that, yeah, this was stupid and I shouldn't have done this. He should apologize for this. This is not something that we expect or desire from him in any way, shape, or form. And it doesn't even show weakness for somebody who makes an honest mistake, or even somebody who makes a bad judgment or error of judgment, to go back and say, you know what, I shouldn't have done this. This was wrong of me, and I hope that you'll forgive me. There's no weakness in doing that. In fact, it shows a strength of character, and I think that it would go a long way for him to admit such a thing and say, hey, you know what, I stepped across a boundary. This was something I should never have done, and I'm very sorry I did it. That would have been fantastic. I'll wait for it, but I'm not going to hold my breath. On the other hand, I find it interesting that there are so many people. Now, I think the real error was that Trump shared this image, but there are images of Barack Obama as a saint, as Christ, as a Messiah. There are even campaign posters showing Barack Obama as a Messiah that were all over social media in 2008 and in 2012. Now, Obama, to his credit, didn't share those images, but the fact that they were around and likely some of them were created by his campaign team, that shows the fact that we haven't had any popes or any prominent clergy or prominent Catholics decrying those from the left shows a selective outrage that I think is extremely hypocritical.
It is. Selective outrage is. I think you mentioned, so Trump came out and said, if we had that clip, we can actually play it. Trump comes out and says, well, I think I was a doctor.
A doctor, yeah.
Or let's let the audience decide here. Let's play the clip.
President, did you post that picture of yourself depicted as Jesus Christ?
Well, it wasn't depicted. It was me. I did post it, and I thought it was me as a doctor, and had to do with Red Cross, as a Red Cross worker there, which we support. And only the fake news could come up with that one. So I just heard about it, and I said, how did they come up with that? It's supposed to be me as a doctor making people better, and I do make people better. I make people a lot better.
First of all, I mean, I don't agree with that. I mean, I'm not sure I believe that. That explanation, especially because what comes on a post 2 days later. As you get that up, let's show the picture of Trump getting a hug from Jesus. Okay, so as you look at that, so I don't know if I believe that. Secondly, I mean, on a basic note about healing people, topic for another day. You were the biggest promoter of the jab, okay, which the damage is insane. So not a lot of healing going on there with that jab.
He was a promoter of the jab, but he wasn't. He certainly wasn't part of the mandatory element of it. He was never a part of the let's make it mandatory.
True that. God bless him for that. So anyway, okay. You're saying you're not messing around with this whole thing is a mistake. Sorry, didn't mean to do that. I just don't buy it because there's a trend going on here. There's a trend of disrespect at the very least to Christians. Okay. Backing up to the Holy Week service. Or before I know you're gonna lose that in the picture in a second. So look at that picture right there. So you have radical left lunatics might not like this, but I think this real nice. Great. Well, what is it? I never was a religious man, but it doesn't seem with all these satanic, demonic, child sacrificing monsters being exposed that God might be playing the trump card. I mean, again, I'm not really finding this funny, especially, in fact, it's kind of disgusting because you're trying to say that, yeah, we're exposed. My administration is exposing these guys. But here's the reality. You're not. You're absolutely not. You punted on the Epstein files. Okay. You were going to bury it completely. If it wasn't for online podcasters and us, we the people who kept pushing it, and we are still pushing it. Because what was it back in February or maybe a year ago where you said this was a hoax? It's not a hoax. There were victims, and we can't mess around with this. We can't laugh at this. And I know we're going to get into Pope Leo and the bishops later. Side note, when was the last time they issued a statement about the release of the Epstein files or praying for the victims? I don't think ever. Right. Okay. Yeah. So talk about selective outrage. So Trump, you're not. So I find that honestly very, very distasteful that you're continuing to post that. And I need to speak up on that as a person. And Michael, we worked hard to get Trump elected. We have got to speak up on this. Going back to, this is a trend. As I've done on all of our media hits, I tried to tell everyone this is not just, the Catholics are actually pretty thick-skinned, okay, in one sense. We can handle a lot. But this is a trend going on. Go to the Holy Week service. Again, let's play Paula White's clip where she basically likens Trump to saying, whatever you do, Mr. President, God's going to bless you.
President, no one has paid the price like you have paid the price. It almost cost you your life. You were betrayed and arrested and falsely accused. It's a familiar pattern that our Lord and Savior showed us. But it didn't end there for him. And it didn't end there for you. God always had a plan. On the third day, he rose, he defeated evil, he conquered death, hell, and the grave. And because he rose, we all know that we can rise. And sir, because of his resurrection, you rose up. Because he was victorious, you were victorious. And I believe that the Lord said to tell you this. Because of his victory, you will be victorious in all you put your hand to.
Let's cut. Nothing wrong with like trying to look at things in your life and model yourself after Christ. It's the whole thing.
Right.
Like, okay, Christ suffered, therefore I need to suffer. Like I'm going to rise again.
As the mass, yeah, as the yeah, as I send you, go forth. You're going to follow in the same footsteps. Like yeah, all that stuff. So yeah.
That's fine. But the key thing is this, is when you equate yourself, whatever you, first of all, God told me, you're saying this, it's one thing if like you kind of like got this feeling in adoration, you're telling maybe privately, but you're on a public stage. This is the Holy Week prayer service. You are the pastoress, Trump's chosen pastoress, Paula White, who has a bit of a sketchy history. And Tucker Carlson's on deeper dives into her as a person. She's also the one behind Carrie Prejean Boulder's booting, one of the main people behind that, getting her out that Religious Liberty Commission. So she's the one saying, I got this revelation from God and President Trump. Whatever you do is going to be blessed by God. And it puts yourself in a very dangerous position to basically make these posts later and equate yourself in some ways. Oh, I'm Jesus the healer. No, you're not. Okay. Yeah. And then 4 days later from that Paula White thing, we have someone on a social media team. I would love to know. I hope it wasn't President Trump. Easter morning, 8 o'clock in the morning. We wake it up. We're just coming back for Easter morning mass. Some of us went to the vigil last night and we had that horrific, vulgar rant. Okay. Yeah. I'm not even going to read it. We could probably throw it on the screen if we have it. Yeah, right there. I'm not even going to say it.
Yep.
By the way, one exorcist told me this, true or not, that every time you cuss or you swear, it's like the language of demons. So you get their ear, you get their attention, because of it. And they want that. So it's like, it's one reason to try to avoid cussing if you can, right? True or not. I think that, what this is before us is, it hurts. It hurts. Mm-hmm. Okay. Christians have suffered these past 2 weeks. And of course on Palm Sundays when we were rejected from entering the Holy Sepulchre, by Netanyahu's government stopping Pizza Bala, although Bishop Barron didn't think it was that big of a deal, but all of Christendom did. Okay. So back, this is the trend. This is what's going on. Michael, are we overreacting to this, or are we on point with this?
No, I don't think we're overreacting. I think that the fact of the matter is that we are all subjects of Christ, whether you are a Catholic or a Christian, or even the pagans are subject to him. And any kind of statement that would either equate yourself to Christ, or that would at least indicate that everything that you do is at his behest, as if you were some sort of prophet fulfilling his divine will, is ludicrous. And it's dangerous to fill his head with that kind of ideology and that kind of thought. And there's a reason why kings always had a jester, because the role of the jester was to maintain the humility of the king. And, I don't think that Donald Trump has a jester, and even if he did, he wouldn't be too willing to listen to him.
It's a powerful insight. So here's the question for you, Michael. Who's the jester for Christ the King? He probably doesn't need
it. Probably Peter.
Or he probably, yeah, that's right. Or maybe he doesn't even need it because he's like in say, he's right. Humility and say, right? But that's a great insight. Okay, so what you're going to find on the show here, we try to do, what every Catholic should be doing is, we don't Pope-splain, okay? Mm-hmm. We don't Trump-splain. The only thing that we do is we Christ-splain, because he's the one who's perfect, okay? Every one of those figures, the Holy Father, President Trump, each in their own way is going to have their fault. I'm going to have my faults. I have more of them than any of those figures, right? So it's part of being the human thing, is learning how to like critique, analyze, speak up. You don't have to do it in a totally arrogant way. Like I don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. Like President Trump has done so much good. Like I can't imagine the stress that he's under in that job. which is why we ended that statement like that is. I don't know what that's like. You know, all the power players that are around that Oval Office, even the spiritual warfare around that man, you know, if you haven't prayed for him, if you haven't prayed for the Holy Father, then maybe think twice before saying something negative about either, right? So it's super, super important just to have that all in context, to have a lot of understanding, compassion, but also boldness and clarity to say what needs to be said. That's the role of a republic, to speak up. You know, so President Trump, he does these statements, and then let's go into kind of now the feud back and forth with what's going on between the president and Pope Leo. And Michael, you mentioned you put together kind of a timeline of what's been going on, and that's very helpful to give us context of the back and forth and what the subject is about. Go ahead.
So back in early March, Pope Leo had started issuing some statements that were obliquely referencing the aggression and the hostilities taking place in Iran. And he didn't say anything directly about Trump or Israel or Iran or anything like that, but he was basically calling for peace. It's a good message. Okay. Basically just saying, look, you know, we need to pray for peace and hope for peace. And we shouldn't be looking for, basically we shouldn't be looking for the military to solve our problems. And okay, I can at least agree with that in principle. The real issue started on March 29th, which was Palm Sunday, when Pope Leo issued his Sunday homily. And what he said, I want to read to you exactly what he said. He said, "Brothers and sisters, this is our God, Jesus, King of Peace, who rejects war." I take issue with that statement because Jesus doesn't necessarily reject war. He is of peace, but he doesn't necessarily reject war. Whom no one can use to justify war. I'm going to show how that's false in just a moment. He does not listen to the prayers of those who wage war, but rejects them, saying, quote, "Even though you make many prayers, I will not listen. Your hands are full of blood." There's a real irony in this remark, because what he's quoting there is the first chapter of the prophecies of Isaiah. And what Isaiah was talking about was not war, has nothing to do with war, had everything to do with the moral and theological corruption of the people of Israel, in particular the priests. Now, listen to this portion and tell me if this sounds familiar. This is from Isaiah. "How is the faithful city that was full of judgment become a harlot? Justice dwelt in it, but now murderers. Thy silver is turned into dross. Thy wine is mingled with water. Thy princes are faithless, companions of thieves. They all love bribes. They run after rewards. They judge not for the fatherless, and the widow's cause cometh not into them." This sounds to me like a perfect reflection of the state of the current curia, the hierarchy within our own church. So if he's going to use a quote from scripture, I really think he ought to apply it properly and understand the context that he's giving. Everything has to be done in context. But he said that the Lord, no one can use the Lord to justify war. But we have this from from the book of Maccabees. Judah Maccabeus, he said this: "The success of war is not in the multitude of the army, but strength cometh from heaven. They come against us with an insolent multitude and with pride, to destroy us and our wives and our children, and to take our spoils. But we will fight for our lives and our laws, and the Lord himself will overthrow them before our face. But as for you, fear them not." Okay, this right here is a complete counter to what Pope Leo had said about how the Lord doesn't hear the prayers of those with regard to war. It's false. And if you don't want to look at the Old Testament as the standard because, well, Christ came and now we have a new standard somehow, listen to what Pope Urban II said in his speech calling for the Crusades. And I think that this is some of the strongest language I have ever read pertaining to warfare.
Can you
He's-
before you read Urban's statement,
Uh-huh.
and you're going into a timeline of the back and forth between Leo and Trump. It just hit me now that statement perhaps is the most important, because the rest are speeches, press interactions. That's a homily. Okay.
Yep.
That means that was written before, probably approved by 3 or 4 people in terms of editors. So that's the most, you can potentially say the rest are just maybe not thought out well or out of context, whatever.
Right.
Homily is much different. And you're right to go on to that it's a constant saying of kind of like, there's no such thing as just war at all. Right.
Right.
So it's left confusion. So continue on with Urban.
So this is what Urban said. I say this to those who are present.
This is 1095, right? 1095.
Yeah.
This is like one of the most famous speeches of the last 2,000 years, right? Top whatever, 50. Okay, because it triggers the whole Crusades, which had so many cultural, historical effects because of that. So take it away.
Now, for context, because I love context, we have to understand that what was happening at the time that Pope Urban II called for the First Crusade, you had a bunch of Christian kings that were warring against each other. And they were all fighting, they were squabbling, they were looking for territory, they were looking for resources, they were basically just trying to grab as much land for themselves as they could amongst themselves. And Pope Urban II was looking for a way to unify Christendom and to say, enough. We need to have, we need to go and fight a common enemy who is an enemy to us all. And who he was talking about were the Muslims who had taken over the Holy Land. Now listen to what he says, because this is really, really important. He said, I say this to those who are present. It meant also for those who are absent. Moreover, Christ commands it, quote, and he's quoting here. He said, all who die by the way, whether by land or by sea, or in battle against the pagans, shall have immediate remission of sins. This I grant to them through the power of God with which I am invested. Oh, what a disgrace if such a despised and base race, which worships demons, should conquer a people which has the faith of omnipotent God and is made glorious with the name of Christ. With what reproaches will the Lord overwhelm us if you do not aid those who, with us, profess the Christian religion? Let those who have been accustomed unjustly to wage private warfare against the faithful now go against the infidels and end with victory this war, which should have begun long ago. Let those who for a long time have been robbers now become knights. Let those who have been fighting against their brothers and relatives now fight in a proper way against the barbarians. Let those who have been serving as mercenaries for small pay now obtain the eternal reward. Let those who have been wearing themselves out in both body and soul now work for a double honor. Behold, on this side be the sorrowful and poor, on that the rich. On this side the enemies of the Lord, on that his friends. Let those who go not put off the journey, but rent their lands and collect money for their expenses. And as soon as winter is over and spring comes, let them eagerly set out on the way with God as their guide. This is incredibly strong. And it stands as a stark contrast to the weak and the limp-wristed approach that the Vatican has had towards pusillanimous conflicts for the last 60 years. It's almost as if after the first 2 world wars, something broke within the Curia, and now people are afraid of any kind of conflict whatsoever, and they say war is bad. War is not necessarily bad. And in fact, if you look towards some of the conflicts that have taken place in the amongst the, and we'll get into this later, actually, I'll save this for a little bit later, but the point is, Pope Leo, in saying that you can't use the Lord as a as a marker or invoke him in fighting a war is false. And Pope Urban II completely dismantles that point. But let's go back to what was going on. So on March 29th, on Palm Sunday, Pope Leo issued that statement, and we just went into why it was wrong. And then from Castel Gandolfo, he directly addressed Trump. Okay, this was on March 31st.
Keep in mind, though, for what it's worth, March 29th was Palm Sunday. So what happened that morning is right there at the Vatican? And remember, Cardinal Pizzaballa and Pope Leo are very, very close.
Right.
So you had the Israeli government, who was, according to Rubio, the main reason why we went to war in the first place with Iran, because they attacked, so we were going to have to attack anyway because Israel attacked. Okay, so the Israeli government stopped Cardinal Pizzaballa from going to do Palm Sunday service. So was it on the back of Pope Leo's mind that, okay, the instigators of this war, okay, are basically now shutting out my churchmen in the Holy Land from this, and they're invoking God, and people in the American government are invoking God? Maybe so.
I don't think so, because as you pointed out, it was a pre-written homily that he delivered in the same time zone as Jerusalem, which means he wouldn't have had word about what happened until afterward.
Potentially. Depends what time the mass was. One of those like midday masses, those noon masses at the Vatican. We'll go back and check. Sometimes they do it on the feast days in Rome, and then the early morning one could be like 8 o'clock in the morning in the Holy Land. So
it depends on what time the statements were made and what time news of the prevention came. And
They are at the very least, this is important just to understand, they're on a very close relationship. Like even Pope Francis was with the pastor, Father Romanelli, in Gaza, right? But who knows? We'll fact check that later. So keep going, Michael. What happened 2 days later?
So March 31st from Castel Gandolfo, he directly addressed Trump for the first time. He said that he hoped that Trump was looking for an off-ramp to end the war, adding, I'm told that President Trump recently stated he would like to end the war. Hopefully he's looking for an off-ramp. Hopefully he's looking for a way to decrease the amount of violence and bombing, etc. That's fine. I don't take any issue with that. But then you have the statement. Let's see. The statement on, was it Easter? No, April 7th, where Trump issued a threat saying that a whole civilization would die tonight. And it sounded like he was threatening nuclear annihilation of Iran. And so Pope Leo, and I think rightly,
which is wrong, because people try to say, oh, he was just trying to like bluff them into thing. But the thing is, if you post that, you have to be willing to do that. Okay. You're the president of the most powerful country with the largest nuclear arsenal. So if you post that and you threaten that, even if it is for bluff, you have to be willing to do that. Okay.
Right.
And obviously that would be tremendously immoral. Okay. So again, on this show, we're not trying to post-splain. We're not trying to Trump-splain, because I think there are faults on both sides. And we're going to go deeper of some of the concerns we have with maybe Pope Leo or what's going on there later in the show. But this is what he posted. And then what happens next, Michael?
You know, I'm actually reminded of what happened in 1984 when President Ronald Reagan was preparing to give an address to the nation, didn't realize that he was already on the air and he was just doing some pre-mic check stuff. And he made some statement about how, well, our bombs are already loaded and we're headed to Moscow and we're going to be dropping nukes pretty soon, or something along those lines. And the next thing you know, Russia goes on high alert because Reagan didn't realize that was a hot mic. That's how serious even to say it was a joke. You can't joke about things like this.
Right.
Because it's that serious. It's that dangerous. So I think that Pope Leo is right in saying that the threat was truly unacceptable. You can't make a threat like that, because essentially what you're doing is you're saying we're willing to target all the civilians and eradicate them because of the leadership. And that's grossly immoral. And Pope Leo added this. He said, there are certainly issues of international law here, but even more so a moral issue for the good of the whole entire population. I would like to invite everyone to truly think in their hearts about the many innocent people, so many children, so many elderly, completely innocent, who would also become victims of this escalation of a war. And to this point, I would add people who are outside the church. And as Pope, I would wish, and I wish popes would speak more like this, the people that would be lost to a massive eradication, as would happen on a civilization-ending event, the people that would be lost, the souls that would be lost, the women, the children, the elderly, because they have not converted, because they've not been baptized, because they haven't been evangelized. That's the real tragedy, not the loss of life. It's the loss of souls.
Well said.
And I really wish that Pope Leo and others in the church would start speaking that way, because that is the real issue. That's what the church exists for.
Dang, that's well said. Because even when President Biden, I know he's not the president, but he's getting near his death.
Mm-hmm.
How many bishops have spoken up publicly and said, "I worry about this man's soul," okay,
right,
who has stood in direct opposition to major core fundamental church teachings, okay? Right on with that, because yes, we can be concerned with human life, but the salvation of souls is
preeminent.
One thing.
Yeah, it's preeminent.
So
then, just to kind of round out this whole timeline, April 10th and April 11th on social media, Pope Leo wrote, "God does not bless any conflict. Anyone who is a disciple of Christ, the Prince of Peace, is never on the side of those who once wielded the sword and today drop bombs." And then during a prayer vigil at St. Peter's Basilica, he wrote, "Enough of the idolatry of self and money, enough of the display of power, enough of war." And then, of course, we get Trump responding to these and saying, well, he should stick to theology, or that was Vance, but we know what Trump's response was. And a lot of it was, it was floundering. It was, I don't really know how to characterize Trump's response other than to say that I think he needs to have somebody who actually knows how to speak to Catholics and speak to a pope produce his public statements along those lines, because it's not been very politic, for one thing. It's not been diplomatic, and it's not been respectful. And there is fault to be seen on both sides. I think, as you know, I'm completely opposed to popes being in press conferences and issuing statements about things going on in the news. I think that's, if a pope is to speak, he should be speaking through formal channels, meaning a bull, an encyclical letter, things that have always been at the papacy's disposal to speak to the world and to speak to the faithful about things that are very concerning of our day. Those are the ways that he should be speaking, not like this. This is a huge mistake, because if he doesn't want to be a politician, if he doesn't want to be treated like a politician, he should stop acting like a politician, which is what politicians do when they go out and give press conferences. I think it's a huge mistake.
Cardinal Mueller he put out a statement yesterday. I think it was much more German. There's a reason he was head of the doctrine of the faith. We're also grateful to Cardinal Mueller for sending a special address to our Catholics for Catholics prayer gala last month. But he said this about the whole feud. Cardinal Mueller said the U.S. has a responsibility for containing dangerous regimes and within the bounds of international law, combating brutal crimes against one's own peoples and other peoples through the sanctions and military force. But in this specific case, he said it must be clearly stated that no one has the right to criticize the Pope. He faithfully followed the mission he received from Christ to bear witness to the gospel of peace. That was a little bit more balanced in terms of kind of like not saying this continuous line from the Vatican about God never blesses wars, which is kind of what you're right. Which is, now that you put on a timeline, I mean, there's enough instances where it's like, Holy Father, you got to clarify, please clarify what you mean, because, I personally believe this. Like, I don't believe that the Iran war is a just war. I mean, I don't. I mean, for different reasons, we don't want to talk specifically about that. But there's enough of us who feel that, who think that, and Pope, or grateful the Pope is kind of calling for peace so strongly. but it would help our case, the case of morality, if you kind of balance it out with there, of course, is a just war theory. Okay. Otherwise, it's going to be like, it's confusing.
Mm-hmm. Well, and look, I think if he wants to comment on the war or on the conflict, he really needs to put together a papal bull and go through Catholic history, go through Catholic doctrine, and express with specificity the rightness or wrongness of the actions that have either led up to, precipitated, caused, and resulted in this conflict with Iran. And he needs to do so from both sides. He needs to examine Iran's policies and actions within the world for the last 47 years, because ever since the Ayatollah took over in 79, we've had a very serious situation where Iran has indeed been sparking terrorist activities across the world. That's a fact. We know that that's been happening. We know that Iran has been engaging in proxy wars and sponsoring proxy wars. We know that Iran has also been involved very intimately in supplying, and it's kind of a reciprocal relationship with China. And it's a very serious one because the two of them together are acting against the interests of the United States. So there is a case to be made for the U.S. to go after Iran. But the question is, what is the objective? Why are we there? What are we hoping to accomplish? And what is the outcome? What does the end game look like? We don't have any of those answers. And we are certainly owed those answers, but we don't have them. And if Pope Leo is going to issue a statement, it needs to be balanced, and it needs to look at the entire issue and not just simply react and say, "Oh no, bombs! We can't have that." That's where I take issue with a lot of what happens with the modern clergy. They start panicking when they see explosions and gunfire, but the world has had war since the very beginning. Since the beginning.
It has, and that's why it's important. Everyone's talking about this just war doctrine. What is it? What is it? What is it? Even Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, yesterday said, yeah, let's familiar. There's a just war doctrine. Well, we're going to get into the specifics again. Refresher. What are those towards the end of the show, and a little bit of the history of it too, as well, like where to come from. So we're very well versed on this, so you can look at every single conflict accordingly. Okay. Before we do that, should we get into now some of the players behind this? Who's behind?
I think that's kind of important.
This is super important. This is one of the big reasons you got to have longer form podcasts to go into this. You can't just do it on social media posts. We tried a little bit with that statement, which you can read on our X account about this whole thing going on. You have players, okay? You have leaders. You have the Holy Father. You have President Trump, okay? It's not just those two people talking to each other. There is a swarm of people, sometimes wolves, a lot of wolves, around these individuals with their other agendas, okay? So Michael, me, others out there, Catholics of goodwill, like we're speaking up, trying to be honest best we can about what we're seeing, how to address this from a Catholic point of view, what to pray for, zero in on, etc. That being said, there are bad actors, okay? Specifically who are amplifying this whole feud going on between the Vatican and Rome. Who are those bad actors? Let's name them. Let's go through what is that. You have, refresher, 2024. You have the largest Catholic landslide in United States history for a Republican candidate, Donald Trump. We worked our tails off to get Trump elected. He was by far the best Catholic option over Kamala Harris. Okay. Normally, again, it's 49% in terms of voting, going back to like whatever the 70s in terms of Catholic presidencies, or in terms of who gets the Catholic vote. And you typically, whatever guy gets the Catholic vote always wins the White House. It's a big deal. Okay. 24, it was like a blowout. It was like the 1985 Chicago Bears Super Bowl, okay, or any other playoff team. Like we just like, I had to slide that in, Michael, or the 1970 Steelers, whatever you want, man. So that's Michael's team. So like it's we blew them out, okay. We 57 to 41%. It's like a 16-point swing, okay. So Democrat strategists, and somebody asked me yesterday, I think it was BBC. So are you guys going to support the Democrat Party now? I'm like, well, how do I answer that? I said, I'm a Catholic, and currently the word God doesn't even show up in the Democrat Party platform. So what do you think my answer is?
Yeah.
I think they got it from there. But okay, the Democrat people, these are the same people who called Cardinal Cupich in after DNC convention and had a abortion truck right outside their thing in Chicago so they could offer free killing of people's babies if they wanted it. And Cardinal Cupich came and gave the prayer. These people are absolutely determined to rip away the Catholic base from the Republican Party. The future of America is Catholic, okay? We're the largest demographic. You go by some of the numbers going in with what's going on, the Easter Vigil, people coming to the church, a lot of the new blood. I know we're losing people on the back end to a degree, which is important to note that. But by and large, a lot of the new conversions are Catholic, okay? The future of America is Catholic. Protestantism is just disintegrating before our eyes, okay? All right, so that being said, these dudes, these guys, they're smart. They're really smart. And you got to take your enemy, your opponent very seriously, okay? Otherwise, they will beat you. They want to create disunity for disunity's sake, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Who are them? Well, as we were there's one individual, Christopher Hale. I don't really know him, but you're probably more familiar with him, Michael, or what he's a lot of his stories about this discord between the Vatican and the U.S. president have been written by him. He's really covered in detail. Okay, now he's pushing a lot of it, and it gets picked up by a lot of the secular liberal sources. Okay, so that's he's a former key Obama strategist. That's probably not former, but currently very closely working with former President Barack Obama. Okay, who was also, don't forget, kind of common knowledge that he was behind pulling the strings in the Biden White House.
Mm-hmm.
So he's hard at work. Then you have the senior advisor to Barack Obama, going back to 2008 campaign, the 2012 campaign, a guy by the name of David Axelrod, who meets the Pope. You want to share some information on David? On who this guy is?
He was Obama's chief strategist. He was the one that effectively got him into the White House to begin with. He has ties to him all the way back to Chicago. And you have to remember also Cardinal Prevost, when he was Father Prevost, also has ties in Chicago. And the funny thing is that you've got David Axelrod, who met with Pope Leo just recently.
Like a couple days ago, 3 days ago. This is what Trump called him out on. President Trump's broadside against the Pope, he mentions David Axelrod meeting.
Yeah, and the thing is, he met with him. It was initially scheduled to be a 2-hour meeting. It went long. It was a 4-hour meeting, and it was so long that he had to actually bump some of his other meetings afterward to accommodate for the fact that he was staying long with David Axelrod. What did they talk about? We don't know. Maybe David Axelrod's coming into the church. Maybe that's what it is. No, I jest. I don't think that
he's a Jewish man from New York, so he's not Catholic. Keep that in mind too.
Mm-hmm. And the thing is, Christopher Hale started talking about this. And what else is interesting is that Christopher Hale was the one who was spreading this rumor that there was a spat between the papal nuncio to the United States and the Trump Pentagon. And he was saying that the Pentagon was trying to strong arm the nuncio, even to the point of threatening the Catholic Church and invoking the Avignon papacy, which I thought was outlandish. And it turned out to be completely false. Not only did the papal nuncio say that this didn't happen, the Vatican also said that this didn't happen. And then we have Cardinal Burke, who stood up and said, yeah, this actually did not happen. Christopher Hale completely made it up. Now, who is he? Christopher Hale worked on Obama's re-election campaign in 2012. He helped lead national Catholic outreach, which is the opposite of what we're doing. He
led that. Really, I did not know that. Yeah. That's interesting.
He also had an internship with the Obama White House and is described as an Obama-Biden White House campaign alum. All right. Here's something else that's interesting. Christopher Hale runs a website or a Substack called Letters from Leo, and he's writing a book on Pope Leo XIV and American politics. And on April 19th, he reported that Pope Leo 14th held a private audience with David Axelrod in Rome. He broke the news on X, noting that Axelrod's role with Obama and mentioning earlier talks between the Vatican and Obama's circle about the potential Obama-Pope meeting. So it seems like Axelrod's trying to negotiate a meeting between Leo and Obama, which now has larger implications into this whole thing. And then Christopher Hale, in one post, even mentioned that he was part of David Axelrod's entourage during the Vatican visit. So he's claiming that he was there. And
okay,
yeah. So now you've got two senior two advisors to the Obama administration that are heavily involved with strategy and Catholic outreach, putting forth all sorts of disinformation with regard to what's happening between Trump administration and the Vatican and all kinds of stuff. And they're trying to coordinate a meeting with Obama. Something is very seriously wrong with this.
It is wrong with this, and we're right to question this and speak up, because it's not normal. Okay, David Axelrod, 4-hour meeting. I mean, think about what that is. Like, probably most audiences are going by my Rome days, like, I don't know, maybe half hour. It depends on the time. They're usually in and out, especially, unless they have like a actual discussion topic to talk about. They're shorter meetings. So big high profile meeting, in the sense of, why is it high profile? Well, they came out with, did the Vatican actually issue a statement of what they met with him about? I don't think they did. It was just kind of one of those, but they did allow pictures though too. That also is significant too, because they don't always allow pictures.
Axelrod was listed on the Vatican's daily itinerary, the meeting with the popes. So he was listed on the Vatican website as meeting with Pope Leo.
Got it. Okay. So you have these individuals who are meeting with Pope Leo, and it's interesting too. Taylor reminded me about this too. Taylor Marshall, about this was not the first time we had a modern Holy Father meeting with a very big leftist strategist. And that was Paul VI, who met with Saul Alinsky 3 times in the 60s and 70s, right? Who was, of course, he wrote the book Rules for Radicals, dedicated to Satan, of course, which Hillary Clinton did her doctoral thesis on Saul Alinsky, okay?
And it was Alinsky that created the Industrial Areas Foundation, which was the first recipient of funding from the Catholic Campaign for Human Development. Barack Obama worked for the Gamaliel Foundation, which has ties to the Catholic Campaign for Human Development. And you start to see the connections. It all comes back to Chicago.
Chicago connection. Absolutely. Good things and bad things hopefully come from Chicago. I'm from Chicago area, rather. So Charlie Kirk was also.
My grandmother was from Chicago.
There you go. And so who are these people? So we're right to ask this, question this, because they are behind some of the implications. Now, in fairness to the whole Pentagon story, Christopher Hale definitely over-amplified it. Okay, he's probably the one who inserted the word Avignon, which is kind of a big deal, because that's like threatening almost military force kind of to the Vatican. That seemed to never have happened. There was tension. All sides agree that there was tension of sorts, right?
That happens in all diplomatic meetings, though.
It happens in all diplomatic meetings, but that's okay, fine. But okay, so let's go to the other players who might be part of this whole like over-amplification attempt to disunify, create havoc. Our 3 tongue-in-cheek beloved Cardinals, okay, who had that CBS interview. Let's play some clips from that interview to get you a feel for what
Chicago.
This is Cardinal Cupich from Chicago, Cardinal Tobit, and Cardinal McElroy. These men have caused grave scandal within the church. It's like, I don't even want to call them like leftists. They really, really have. They've danced around the truth. We said Cardinal Cupich is the one who officiated at the DNC. No Catholic clergy should have been at that meeting. Did not call him out for anything. Don't even think he mentioned Jesus Christ at his prayer. And then you have Cardinal Tobin. This is the guy. Remember, this is the guy who was caught on social media. People forget about this in 2019. Who apparently had texted his sister on accident, but it was like post. It was a direct. It was on X back in the day, Twitter. Okay,
Mhm.
and he had said, "Nighty night, baby, I love you." Okay, I don't want to just paint negative stuff about the bishops for that sake, because it's you get over the top. But if these are the guys,
this was during the time that he had a homosexual male model from Italy living in.
That's the point. It came out later that he had a homosexual model living in his rectory.
Yeah.
For those of you not familiar with church stuff or clergy stuff, I can tell you something. That is not normal. I'm a seminarian for 15 years. Okay. I have a lot of experience with this stuff. Like, who lives in a rectory? Who doesn't live in a rectory? I can tell you that. A model from Italy who's homosexual would not be living. One thing in a priest rectory is only in a bishop rectory, in a rectory of a cardinal. What? Yeah. So he had texted this 99 baby. Now, if you have a sister, just ask yourself, when was the last time you texted your sister, 99 baby, I love you? I have sisters, and I can tell you this, I don't text them that. Okay. So
I've got two sisters in the same here.
If I texted them that, they probably would never text me back again. So it's like, this is the guy. This is the guy, let alone his, his promotion of LGBT stuff. McElroy. Let's go to McElroy, the third card. Let's get that clip ready so we can get these guys on the screen. People can see them in person. McElroy is the one who covered up for over Rachel Mastro Giacomo's satanic abuse ritual by a priest. He covered up for that priest, put him back into commission. So these three men doing a CBS interview. Also, it's very, very, it almost never happens. You have, I don't know if ever, three cardinals of one country sit down together for a joint TV interview and go after the current sitting president.
Mm-hmm.
Seriously?
Right.
Tell me this isn't planned. Tell me they are in conjunction with David Axelrod, Christopher Hale, and others. Okay. Let's hear from these guys a little bit from what they had to say.
What do you think having an American Pope has done for the Catholic Church here in the U.S.?
I think it's put Chicago on the map.
Finally. Oh, we're proud. We're proud that we produced a Pope. Chicago can say that.
The Archbishop of Chicago, Cardinal Blaise Cupich, as well as Cardinals Robert McElroy of Washington, D.C., and Joseph Tobin of Newark, New Jersey, agreed to their first ever joint interview. Their candor surprised us about the new pope and what they're hearing in the pews.
We're the three American cardinals that are actively serving dioceses right now. So we listen to a lot of people. It's part of the job description. And I think we're aware of the anxieties of people about the threats to peace at all different levels.
Would you like to see this first American Pope be more outspoken on issues that he disagrees with?
He's the pastor of the world. He's not a pundit. So the distinction is he's not going to pronounce on everything, but he's going to pronounce on what's important.
War is back in vogue.
He started in January with a speech criticizing U.S. military action in Venezuela. After that, the Vatican's ambassador in the U.S. was called to the Pentagon for a meeting, which two church officials described to 60 Minutes as unpleasant and contentious. Both the Pentagon and the Vatican have said since in multiple statements that it was routine and provided an opportunity for an exchange of ideas.
Let's cut it there. The so that's a feel. You can watch the whole 15-minute interview later if you really want to. But those are the men. Again, these are also the last point about these, the bios of these people. Okay, these are the sons of McCarrick. Okay, Theodore McCarrick, former Cardinal McCarrick, may he rest in peace, because we want all souls to go to heaven, or that's whatever. As much, this man was evil. Okay?
Lord have mercy.
Lord have mercy. He was so evil. He did so much harm to the church. He abused hundreds and hundreds of seminarians. Yep. He used his influence and power to negotiate deals with the Chinese Communist Party. He sold out the church there. Horrible man. He's estimated as having named or gotten into positions to be bishops, about 20% of the bishops in this country. Those three men openly have given credit to Teddy McCarrick for getting them to be where they are today. Okay. So these guys, Lord have mercy on them. Okay. For their continuous scandals to the church. McElroy's in DC, right on Trump's doorstep. Okay. Zupit's in Chicago, and then the Tobit's in New Jersey. These men are the ones speaking like that. So we are absolutely right to step back, because Catholic, look, you got to be smart. You got to be so smart. God gave us a brain to really kind of look at through all this stuff going on. Like, read through the noise, see through the noise, what's happening. Okay. Because both sides will try to use the Pope, both sides try to use the president, but they got to keep on point for what their mission is. Michael, comments on these Cardinals?
Well, I'm trying to keep my comments charitable. I don't know that I have anything charitable to say about them. So,
yeah, it's like, fair enough, because again, they need prayers, but know who these men are and put them in their place.
Mhm.
I was gonna say one other thing about this whole Catholic situation, but the last sign about who's behind these, amplifying this feud going on here. I agree, there is some discord. There absolutely is. Some side, the other side says, okay, everything's fine and peachy and dandy. I've had people from high places in the administration also have messaged me saying everything's good. Like, let's just downplay this. Well, not necessarily. There is definitely discord going on. So let's address this. The other sign, the last sign, we said Christopher Hale's behind this. We said David Axelrod has a meeting. We have these Cardinals, is the kind of media that's reaching out to us. There are some stories that we get where it's a lot of the more conservative outlets who ask Catholics for commentary. This time around, it's every single major liberal, like, hardcore. You got CNN, you got New York Times, you got BBC, NPR. Why would they be reaching out to us? Why? Because this advances their case 100%. Back to it. They do not want, they know that their Democrat Party in a two-party system is still their preferred cow, okay? Or donkey, I should say. And they want the Catholic base away from that. So, we debate back for, is it even worth it going on these places and talking about this stuff? Because I know what they're doing. I know they're trying to use me to say, oh, it's discord. Now, the way I see that is like, look, anywhere that I can talk about Christ, I'm going to try to do that. We should, want it, and
well, we should speak the truth in time and in place, regardless of who is asking the questions.
That's it. And so that is what's going on. So they are making this attempt at trying to rip us away from this base. So yeah, we have a mission to speak the truth, always and everywhere. Final comments on some of the players behind this before we jump into just war doctrine, Michael?
No, I mean, it just goes back to these people have an agenda. The USCCB is nothing but the Democrat Party at prayer. Its only issue is to try and maintain the flow of funds from the federal government into their coffers. It's the love of money all over again. And I'll just go back to what Isaiah said in his prophecy that I cited earlier. He said, thy princes are faithless, companions of thieves. They all love bribes. They run after rewards. So I can't think of a more apt description of what we're seeing among the episcopacy right now.
And what should be, how should you feel about this all? For me, one of the things is I don't necessarily see this as bad. People say, are you worried that there's discord between the Vatican and the United States? I'm like, that's the whole point of a republic, okay? America was set up to you have a church which should be free and independent, that speak its mind, the voice of truth of Christ. Will there be discord? Of course there's going to be. That's okay. That healthy tension is necessary. You need that. The church, how the church state should function in a healthy society. Just war theory. What is it, Michael? Talk to us about this, because everyone's talking about it, but few are going into the details of what it actually means. What are the benchmarks of this? Where did it come from? Take it away, Hichborn.
Right. So just war theory goes back to Augustine. The idea is that there are certain things that have to be understood before determining whether aggression towards another nation would be justified or not. What's interesting is that when we're talking about just war, a lot of this has to do primarily with Christian to Christian nations. But when we look at Christian nations fighting against non-Christian nations, specifically pagan nations, it's not that just war goes out the window, because obviously targeting civilians is still just as immoral, whether they're pagans or Christians. But I don't know that the same ideas apply in the same way, because what you're dealing with primarily is the spread of the gospel and the spread of Christian ideologies. Obviously, with just war, you're talking about a last resort. But if you're talking about a pagan nation or a nation that's spreading false ideologies like communism, the last resort is the fact that they are spreading these false ideologies. There's a reason why the church has always burned heretics. And the reason for that is that you have to make sure that the heresy is cut off in such a way that people don't want to spread it, because if they do, they're going to get burned. It acts as kind of a deterrent. So as a last resort, when it comes to a pagan nation, yes, you want to try and convert the nation, but if that nation is engaging in a propaganda campaign against yours and undermining the truth, and even giving these people to acts of sedition against the lawful authorities, well, then you've got impetus, and the last resort's already been exhausted. Just cause, valid authority, probable success. The real issue that we're facing, however, in this world is that we don't have Christian nations anymore. We have pagan nations, we've got secular nations, we've got atheist nations, but we don't really have any Catholic nations that are engaging in wars against other Christian or Catholic nations. And even if they were engaged in some sort of conflict with pagan nations, the idea of justification kind of gets blurred, because we're not even sure what the point of the conflict would be. If it has nothing to do with the truth, if it has nothing to do with the defense of the people, it usually has something to do with control of resources, which may or may not be valid depending upon what's going on. But I think that the problem that we're facing right now, specifically with Iran, is that we don't have real information. We have a lot of opinions on either side. We have a lot of conflicting facts. We don't know which set of facts is true, which is not, even coming from the president. I don't know which of his reasons for us going to war with Iran are the case. I don't know what his intentions are, because he says things like a whole civilization is going to be annihilated. And then he says things like, we're trying to make sure that they don't have a nuke. So it's the question of validity gets so muddied that I don't know that anybody can really answer the question, except to say that because there's no clear resolution and there's no clear objective, well, maybe that would mean that this isn't justified. If that's going to be the question that we want to talk about, well, lay out the case, make the case. I think Ed Feser, he's a Catholic professor of theology. He did that, and he did that very well. And not enough people are talking about it from this particular point of view. I don't know that he looks at it in the full context. Iran has 47 years of terrorism against all sorts of nations around the world. Iran has been fighting proxy wars and sponsoring terrorism around the world. So there are certain elements that need to be contended with on a particular scale, and I think that they need to be addressed and they need to be discussed. But by and large, the only ones who are actually talking about the justification of this war are people like Ed Feser, and then other people are just kind of tossing it out there, either in terms of saying, well, what we're doing is justified, we fit this, that's exactly what we're doing. Or they're going, you guys are using bombs and shooting people, that's bad, so it's unjust. I'm tired of armchair quarterbacks trying to make a determination here. We need adults in the room to lay out a real case and to bring forth real facts to show us exactly what it is that's happening, what's justified and what's not. That's what we need. And this is why I say that the Pope shouldn't be issuing statements. Stop with the statements. Make a case, issue a papal bull, go through everything that could possibly be gleaned about this situation. Give us the best possible analysis from a Catholic perspective, and then teach us, the people, why this is right or why this is wrong. But don't just say, well, Jesus doesn't bless wars. Stop that. Stop that. That's not helpful.
Yeah, you've got to be. You agreed. It's and given the number of times it's come up from Pope Leo in that way without really clarification, it's like hard to believe that this is not intentional. So it's like, why don't you speak up more clearly on this? Like, what do you mean? Like, articulate what this is. The bishops did release their countering JD Vance from last night at TBUSA about just war. We could probably play that clip in a second here, but just for where we stand, like see in our own sense, what I see right now in this case, like from what the bishops are saying or alluding to at the very least, like I don't think this meets the criteria of a just war. I mean, I don't like. And it's what Michael and I are doing is super healthy. This is what we should be doing. We should be debating. Catholic leaders should be talking about this. Like, what is this? Because we have to help our Catholic people in administration understand this and talk about this, because they're going a million miles an hour. They don't have time to sit down and really think about this. They should, because they're the one pressing the buttons, sending the bombs. Yeah. But is it the last resort? That's one of the first thing. Is it the last resort? My big thing with this, is it the last resort with Iran? Well, we bombed the heck out of them for 3 weeks. That didn't work. In fact, we ended off in a worse position than we were before the war. Before the war, the Straits of Hormuz were open. Now they're shut with, potential for a toll. It also triggered, talking about proportionality, it triggered Israel saying, okay, we're all at war. Let's just blow through southern Lebanon.
On the other hand, as you pointed out, Marco Rubio said that the reason that we went to war to begin with was because Israel was poised to do it first and we needed to be in control. So if Israel was poised to do it first, then we didn't trigger Israel. Israel triggered us.
Then it goes, good point. Then it goes to this. Why is Israel triggering us?
Yeah, why are we being led around by the nose?
That's the point. And that's what, I don't care if mainstream media or if people high up there, President Trump wants to say 100% approval rating. Look at the polling among the young people. They are done. They are done with being led around the world by this 1948 state of Israel. That's it. We're sick of it. Okay. And American blood, American money is paying for the Greater Israel Project. Okay. Yep. And that's just, we see that. So, but all that being said, why are they letting this in? Why do we let that? Okay. If we're the valid authority, why are we letting our greatest ally do this? They're not even really an ally in that sense. So how does the war being stopped right now? Why is there no bombing in Iran right now? Is it because we're bombing them? No, because we blockaded Iran. We're blockading the Straits of Hormuz. So it's like, you're telling me that it was necessary. I do not believe in that nuclear threat was on the table. In fact, we don't know all the information, but Joe Kent, who had the highest security clearance in the country, who I come to know, we interviewed him on stage, like him a lot. He was the counterterrorism intelligence, had said over and over and over again, it was common knowledge among our people that they did not have the capacity for nuke. There was no imminent threat. There was none. There was none. Right. So I don't think it was that thing or that precarious position. And then how are we going to stop? We're stopping by a blockade. So the blockade is working, and basically non-violent means are actually working. So it was not the last resort.
Right. Blockade should have been well, on the other hand, the blockade is only effective because we did take out their naval and their proximity missile threats to the Strait of Hormuz. So there's a case that could be made that the blockade only works because we took out their military capabilities to stop our blockade or to breach the blockade. We
potentially fair enough. That's a good point. Or like again, we're both of you are humble enough to know we don't understand all the nuances of like freezing acids and all
And
stuff. But I do believe
kind of my position, though. That's
Yeah.
why I keep saying we don't know enough to be able to make a real proper determination. We have to have a full analysis. We need somebody who's got access to all the different facts to pull them together to make a case, and then allow that case to be tested on just war theory. I think that's the best way forward, but we don't have that.
Here's what we do have. We have the cash in our pockets to stop sending to that nation state over there that has an insatiable desire for destruction and blowing through neighboring countries. That would be the 1948 state. We do have that power. And that's, if they're the ones, like we kind of agree that they're the one who initiated this thing, we could stop that. That would be the last means of resort. Okay. Rather than blowing up something or stopping, it's like, stop them. Again, we're not painting the Ayatollahs as anything pretty. Like, there's a lot of bad countries out there. Look at the CCP. Why don't we go to the CCP? You want to talk about people who are being hurt, destroyed? The Uyghur people. They have open concentration camps. They're harvesting organs by the thousands.
Yep.
Okay. If we're like, oh my gosh, yeah, 47,000, or actually, the figures since the rebellion is from the Ayatollah itself, like 3,700 people have been killed, which is probably more like 7,000. That's what human rights people estimate, that 7,000 people have been murdered by the regime in Iran since like November. But whatever number that is, that does not equal what the CCP is currently doing. Therefore, should we go bomb the heck out of the CCP? The Uyghur people? It's like, it's got to be like, but anyway, this is good. This is really good. We're talking about this. I cut you off though. Do you want to like give examples from history? Like, what did Benedict XV do in World War I? What was that guy's the Holy Father? What was his reaction to World War I?
So Benedict XV was urging Europe to stop the hostilities, and the reason he was calling it the suicide of the West, and he was absolutely right, because what was happening, everything started with the assassination of Archduke Ferdinand. With that assassination, you had a cascade of alliances that suddenly came into effect for something that should have been resolved at a board table, and saying, okay, somebody from your country assassinated the leader from our country. Our two countries need to resolve this. We need to figure out who the perpetrator was, bring him to justice, et cetera, et cetera. Instead, there were blocks on communication. There were blocks on any kind of real investigation. There was no relinquishing of the guilty party. And so they started calling in their favors, their alliance favors. And with those alliances came additional alliances. And all of the third and fourth party alliances started to come into effect. And as a result, everybody was fighting over something that should have been handled privately. And so Pope Benedict XV desperately was trying over and over and over to broker peace. But, and you have to remember, at the very beginning of the Great War, people thought it was going to be a picnic. There were villages that went out to the battlefield and they set out picnics to watch the fighting, because they thought it was going to be this great thing, this grand thing. And there was all sorts of pomp and circumstance regarding, I mean, the parades that led up to the fights, these people were wearing all sorts of pomp and ceremony and these real ceremonious raiments as they were marching into combat. And then the real fighting began, and people were coming back missing limbs. The horror and death of what was seen just on the first day was so awful that people were coming back. They were throwing up. You had PTSD from civilians who simply watched what was going on. It was a real true horror show. And so Pope Benedict XV was trying very hard to stop the hostilities, because these were Christian nations, Catholic nations fighting each other. And it didn't work. Nobody listened. Nobody listened to him. But what's interesting is I started looking through kind of a history of papal condemnations of international conflicts, wars. And when you go back, you don't see popes condemning any nation going to war with another nation. You have popes condemning assaults on the papal states. You have popes condemning war that is perpetrated upon the Catholic Church and perpetrated upon Christians, Catholics, but not any real condemnations of wars between two nations. Now, for instance, you have in 1204, the sack of Constantinople. Pope Innocent III condemned the sack of Constantinople. He didn't condemn the crusade, the Fourth Crusade, but he condemned the sack of Constantinople. Why? Because you had this attack of crusaders on a Christian city. They went in and they sacked this Christian city. That's why it was condemned. You had Pope Gregory the 11th and the War of the Eight Saints. This is from 1375 to 1378. This was a conflict between the papacy, the Avignon papacy, and the coalition of Italian states. And what Pope Gregory the 11th did is he excommunicated the Florentines because they were warring against the papal states. In 1299, you had Boniface VIII and Edward I's invasion of Scotland. So King Edward I, he invaded Scotland. The Scottish leaders appealed to the Pope, and so the Pope condemned Edward I's invasion of Scotland because it was an unjust aggression. So that was really the first and only instance that I saw a condemnation of a Pope against a particular form of combat, and he condemned it as an unjust aggression because he said it was an unjust war.
You tell me that's one of the only instances that you've found where they specifically said this war is wrong?
Prior to the Napoleonic Wars, yes. Pope Innocent X, he actually condemned the peace treaty of Westphalia, which ended the 30 Years' War, but he was condemning the treaty because it had certain clauses that were really harmful to Catholicism. It was harmful to the church. So you go through the history and you see that papal condemnations of warfare don't really exist. The Pope will condemn certain hostilities against civilians, certain hostilities against the church, certain hostilities against papal authority in the papal states, but not really from one nation to another, unless it was something that was egregiously and obviously unjust, such as King Edward I's invasion of Scotland. Aside from that, you just don't have anything that goes into that.
They definitely, though, at least recently, they may not have official pronouncement statements, bulls, and encyclicals against specific wars, but they make their personal feelings, their prudential guidance very publicly known. I mean, you and I were talking about this yesterday. World War I actually began not with Benedict XV. It began with Pius X, Saint Pius X. Mm-hmm. He died on August 20th, 1914, at age 79, shortly after the war, with many accounts attributing his death to a broken heart while physically suffering from a heart attack and influenza. His grief over the outbreak of war in Europe, which he called the suicide of civilized Europe, is widely considered to have caused his death. For its worth, you got Pius X, you got Benedict XV. Mm-hmm. Go to even Pius XII. He as Pope, he releases the only encyclical in German. Was it Meet Sorge Brenner? I want to say, top of my head. Basically condemning Nazi socialism, which is really the thing that started the Second World War. So that was an indirect hit. And then you have John Paul II, right, who famously said in 2003, and he was right with this, St. John Paul, "Mai più la guerra, mai più la guerra," from the Angelus. Never again war. My generation has seen war. This can't happen with the Iraq War. Don't bomb Baghdad. The U.S. did that a week later. Okay, so maybe they haven't pronounced it with official set documents, but they've done at least what Leo has done in different imperfect ways. Pope Leo has done, right, and kind of saying this is kind of bad. Would you agree with that?
That's what they've done. Yeah.
Yeah. What else? You're in Napoleonic War? Yeah, go ahead.
I want to read you something. It's just kind of an interesting point. As I was researching the history of papal involvement in various international conflicts or interkingdom conflicts, in 1139, you had the Second Lateran Council. It was called by Pope Innocent II, and
this is crazy by audience. Michael told me this before. You're gonna love this point. Like Second Lateran Council. What year was it? Way back, like 12 whatever.
1139.
1139, like before Francis of Assisi.
Mm-hmm.
And they released this crazy statement about what kind of weapons you're allowed to use. Go.
Right. But it's not just the weapons that were allowed or not allowed. It was on whom they could be used. That's what I found so interesting about this. So Canon 29 of the Second Lateran Council says this: we prohibit under anathema that murderous art of crossbowmen and archers, which is hateful to God, to be employed against Christians and Catholics from now on. In other words, the use of crossbows and Catholics, and the reasoning that was given, actually, by the way, was because they were capable of being used to penetrate the armor of the knights, and the knights were your noblemen. So they were used primarily against the noblemen, but it actually goes a little bit into specifics. It says, let me see if I can find the exact portion I was looking for. Yeah, so the crossbow was relatively easy to use and required a far less training than a traditional longbow or the lifelong martial skill of the mounted knight. A common foot soldier or mercenary could potentially kill a heavily armed, expensively trained noble knight from a distance. This threatened the feudal social hierarchy, where warfare was ideally and the domain of the knightly class. And so what you have is one of the first instances of what we would call total war. Not quite total war, but it's a prelude too, because the knights were meant to fight each other primarily. The nobles would fight the nobles, the plebes would fight the plebes. You have the pikemen, you've got the swordsmen, you've got, they would fight each other, but the use of archers took away that personal element of warfare. And the knights were primarily used to go in and to, they were the shock troops, and they would break the line so that the men could get through and then surround from behind. But this was all warfare between Christian nations. That's what this applied to. It didn't apply when going after Islamic nations, pagan nations, okay, nations that were non-Christian or even heretics. So if you were going to enter into warfare against non-Christians or heretics, the prohibition on the use of longbows and crossbows did not apply. And it was...
That's crazy. I don't understand that.
Well, because I think that the idea is that the regulation of war primarily applies to Christian on Christian nations, but the regulation on war doesn't apply as equally when it comes to Christian nations against pagan nations. Because at some point, a lot of times you have pagan nations that were conquered by Christian nations for the purpose of spreading the faith. That doesn't mean that we want to spread the faith at the point of a sword. But when you look at, say, what Cortez faced in Mexico when he was up against Montezuma, Montezuma and the Aztecs were horrifically evil. They had just finished slaughtering, what was it, like 30,000 men in a day, atop one of the pyramids. And so Cortez and his men, they saw this, and they went in and they took out the leadership, and they said, this has got to stop. We can't allow this to happen. And the idea was that they wanted to be able to bring the faith to the people, but you can't do that while they're under the subjugation of something as evil as Montezuma and their bloodthirsty gods. So there is a reason why certain weapons were not allowed within Christian on Christian warfare, because you didn't want to diminish and to destroy Christian society. You had wars between kings because they had feudal disputes about whatever, maybe somebody's father was dishonored. I don't know. And the popes didn't really comment on those. They just kind of let those things play out. And a lot of it was left to the prudence of the leadership at the time to hash these things out. Today, we have a very serious problem where we can annihilate entire regions at the touch of a button, and there's no personal element to warfare at all. We have total warfare to such a degree that schools are targeted, hospitals are targeted, everything is a target. The combatants hide within civilian populations. Guerrilla warfare was pretty much introduced into the Christian world under during the Napoleonic Wars. It's become a very serious problem now, and I don't know what the answer is. But again, I think that this is something that needs to be discussed on the papal level. I think that the Pope needs to study these issues and really help us to address and to understand what's legitimate. What can we do when it comes to warfare? What should we do? How should we approach the weapons that we now have? And how do we combat those who have them, even if we still have them? How do we address this? How do we fix the problem? Instead of just saying, well, stop fighting, stop with the belligerence.
Right.
That's not helpful.
This a great analysis there too, just on how the regulations were. I want to understand it better too, like why you could use the crossbows on, you can't use crossbows on Christians, but non-Christians, they left it up in the air.
Mm-hmm.
That'd be great to go deeper into. This natural just war theory it really stems from the natural law, right? The law that's written in each of us. And we see traces of this to this day, right? You mentioned crossbow. You mentioned go to the Civil War too. Just they were reticent. Both armies are reticent to use the repeating carbines, right? Until the end of the war.
Mm-hmm.
They're like, who cares? It was the shot. You had like 2 shots a minute. Basically, you had to reload. But the cavalry was already using that early on in the war because they didn't care to get like 6 or 7 shots a minute. But it's like there's always this reticence to use the most lethal stuff to this day, where the whole conversation is nuclear weapons. Like we can't really do that. The moral case. So these are non-Christians talking about this stuff, and it just shows that this does come from the natural law, right? So the natural law infused with the light of divine revelation through the Catholic Church. There's nothing like it. There's nothing like our faith, which is why we got to bring it. So final thoughts, Michael. This is a long, great show.
Yeah, I think I've said my piece. I do want to be clear. Look, one of the reasons that I don't take a side in this particular conflict is because I don't feel competent enough to know enough about the information to make a moral judgment. I can say that there are certain principles that need to be applied, and I think that there are certain principles that have not been met. But there are certain elements to this that ring true, such as the 47 years of hostility conducted by Iran, the proxy wars that they've been funding, and that kind of thing. And so there is a case to be made. I don't know that it's been made well. I don't know that it's actually been made at all. But I just don't feel competent to be in a position to make a moral judgment on this matter one way or the other. And unfortunately, Pope Leo, who should be in a moral position to issue a statement on this, has not made a case either. He's just simply reacted. And I don't think that's helpful.
It's a very nuanced case. Important to watch it, understand it, watch this whole show. If you just joined us late to see what was said. Again, we don't Trump-splain. We don't Pope-splain. All we need to try to do is Christ-splain, because he's the perfect one through his teachings in the church. So we're going to end with a prayer. It's been a great, important show to talk about this. It is great to see, though, how, once again, what's front and center is what does the Catholic Church teach on this? That, no matter where you fall in this stuff, that's a win. When you have, we came out, this is kind of a cool thing. Catholics for Catholic was in the front page of the New York Times just 2 days ago, or Wall Street Journal, mind you, for our statements on this war. When you're able to get secular newspapers talking about what do Catholics think about this, that's good. We want the conversation to be about ultimately the Lord, not ourselves or any other group. It's that, and that's a win. Let's pray. Say a prayer. We're going to say the St. Michael prayer to defend our president, our elected leaders, Pope Leo, all of our bishops, and all of our men and women in the armed forces for their ultimate protection. And as Michael, you said so well, it's not about their physical death that matters. It's about their salvation of souls. That's what counts. St. Michael, the archangel, defend us in battle, be our protection against the wickedness and snares of the devil. May God rebuke him, we humbly pray. And do thou, Prince of the heavenly host, by the power of God, cast into hell Satan and all the wicked spirits who prowl about the world, seeking the ruin of souls. Amen. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. This has been a great edition of Catholic Champion. We will see you next time, same place. God bless you all, and fight on.